It's time for another episode of Off the Record, On the Rocks. Join Michael Toner and Ankarina Lara and break down the latest news on all things crypto, metaverse, and Web3, filtering out noise and connecting dots as we pour ourselves into the future.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Off the Record, On the Rocks with my good friend, Mr. Ankarina Lara. How are you doing, sir?
Michael, I am doing so good. The summer is on. We just learned, we've been reading some tea leaves here on the record, off the rocks. Off the record, on the rocks. And we drank it down at the bottom of the cup. There's some Bitcoin, some digital gold, baby. It's happening.
Nothing is breaking through more this week than the headline, XRP is not a security. We have been looking at this court filing for the last 3 years, realistically, but over the last 3 months, zeroing in the judge making a ruling late Thursday night, markets moving swiftly on Friday, reacting to this news. It's a little bit nuanced. We're going to get into it here on the show. We'll pull it apart of what this means. XRP is not a security, and we will back up all the way to Mr. Gary Gensler booking the National Press Club on Monday, 48 hours from today, and yours truly will be in the audience asking Mr. Gensler, have you been involved in the definition of crypto as a security? And sir, what the hell is this new commodity-based trust shares rule, the SEC late Friday night accepting the filing for the Bitcoin ETF. BlackRock's filing for the ETF. So we got to get to Fink and BlackRock, but let me get your hot take on XRP is not a security.
Yeah, look, we've been waiting. We've been calling it. We've called a number of these things, but the slow march of the SEC and of the now sort of pseudo resolution of this really does make me rewind to when they got into it with them, which I want to say was 4 years ago-ish. This is pre-pandemic. This is 2019, could have been a little bit earlier. The SEC succeeded in basically pausing XRP and Ripple's role. Like, I look back 4 years, how many altcoins were there? There were probably a couple hundred. Maybe there was up to 1,000. You fast forward 4 years, there are tens of thousands. So if there was any first mover advantage that Ripple enjoyed, that's been negated. Did they get a ruling that they want? I think we got to unpack it. I think they kind of did, but then they kind of didn't. And then in that amount of time, we all know when you got your Jesse Changs coming out of nowhere with FedNow, you got the Prometheus group. These people, it's incestuous. They move around. It has the vibe like they basically got a backhanded win, if you will. They lost a lot of their brain trust in the process. XRP and Ripple are probably not going to go to jail or be fined, but are they really going to be able to do anything meaningful? I kind of feel like maybe this might not be their moment, even though it should feel like it's their moment.
It is so interesting. You had Brad Garlinghouse out there sort of talking about how this decision was coming. They were throwing out July dates. Starting on Monday of this week, every morning I'm checking Google Alerts. I'm looking XRP. I know it's going to pop. I feel it coming. I told you it's the moment I knew Gensler booked the press club to basically get out in front of something or to give the SEC's next chapter of this narrative. I still feel very strongly. I think we're going to try to do a very special Off the Record, On the Rocks part 2, episode 51 part 2. So first episode kicking off season 5 here, and I think we'll need to do a debrief after I get to hear if my hypothesis is true. I think Gensler will come out on Monday with whatever the next iteration of this story is, because there will be press in the audience. Undoubtedly, there will be publicly traded companies, PR reps, communications professionals, folks like myself who are looking for regulation and regulatory clarity. And Gary's got some new information to answer questions around. And so the nuance here, let's get into it a little bit. The judge basically, to give the background on the full premise, the SEC lawsuit originally was trying to get Ripple to stop offering this XRP token under the premise that it was a security and therefore it required additional regulation. What it has really amounted to here is it and we talked about this on the last episode, that all of these ETFs were listing Coinbase as the surveillance partner. So this whole other news line about Brian Armstrong and Coinbase and the surveillance partners and BlackRock, now you apply that same logic of why those guys were doing that to what it's going to come down to is where you buy this XRP token. If you bought it directly from Ripple, I guess the judge is saying, or the ruling is saying, that it would have a reasonable expectation, the buyer would have a reasonable expectation that their investment would increase. Therefore, by the very fact of who you bought it from and how you purchased it, it would be considered a security. But if it's bought off of an exchange, and the court documents said the defendant's motion for summary judgment is granted as to the programmatic sales, the other distributions, and denied as to the institutional sales. So now this parsing, everybody's calling it a big W, Ripple's calling it a big W, markets are saying it's a W, Coinbase is calling it a W. You can buy XRP on Coinbase now, today, but there's some real nuance to this. So let me get your take on this splitting of hairs here.
It's the splitting of hairs too with this. I mean, if you just kind of back out of it from a macro view, it's a weird concept that the creator of this thing, the software purveyor, if you're getting it from them, it's a security. But if you go behind the building to some gray market, potentially black market location behind the bowling alley, aka off of some weird DEX exchange, then it's just okay. It's fine. Like, it's almost like they don't want to know where you got it. Therefore, obviously some random guy selling it to you never told you it could possibly increase in its investment. So that nuance to me feels like it's a real big leap just mentally of like, well, what kind of other markets even work like that? But anyway, forget that for a second. The other part that I think is wild is I know a couple of folks who've been holding XRP tokens now for years, like in some cases way too many years. And everyone was saying it's gonna go, back to its all-time high, which I want to say is like $3.50 or $3.
$3.84, I think.
And they were saying no, it's gonna go to $1 because they're hoping it would have like doubled. And there was a candle wicked it up that I saw that went like maybe 95 cents, which would have been a proper doubling, but not to $1. But then you just see it go cratering because as soon as that XRP token appeared on Coinbase app, on my app, my surveillance partner, I just sold everything. I'm like, sell. Like, get rid of this. Give me some. I want Bitcoin. I've been holding XRP just waiting for a lift of any kind. So I feel like we're going to have a real deep trough. The XRP community or whatever is strong. What's the product? It's supposed to be like a better way of doing Swift. Like, is it still that? Because if that's what it still is, that is so antiquated. Because now we got FedNow, central bank digital currencies, and we got Fink saying that Bitcoin is going to be the ultimate transaction mechanism. So I feel like Garlinghouse got the W because he didn't get fined and go to jail. But basically, every other person in the XRP army, I kind of feel like are still left holding the bag, not to use a bad pun.
I mean, it is XRP versus the SEC. I think at least here in the short term, in the first 48 hours, the markets are definitely viewing this as a win for crypto. When you start to talk about the utility of XRP and how it's being used, and you talk about a new mechanism for the Swift banking system, that is a great segue into BlackRock and Fink, which I also found super interesting. The timing of this judge ruling on Thursday late night, hitting the news waves early Friday morning, July 14th, and the same day, Fink is hitting CNBC. He was booked on that show likely well in advance, and now he's out there hitting chapter 2 of his narrative. So if a couple weeks ago he was driving digital gold, this week's narrative was all about becoming an international an international currency
settlement.
Yeah. And so BlackRock, we've talked about these guys, the world's largest asset manager, out there talking about digital gold, now talking about international currency. We know XRP solves this. XRP is not a security. Again, I'm gearing up for what do I need to ask Mr. Gensler to get some clarity, because everyone's saying this is a win, but BlackRock is trying to drive, I think, a public perception to get the everyday retail investor to feel comfortable now with, if the world's largest asset manager is talking about crypto and Bitcoin, I guess I'm good with it, right? I mean,
Well, and let's talk about the timing, like you said, right? A guy like Fink, who's the CEO of the company in the largest company in the world, as we've said before, 10 or 20 or 30 trillion dollars under management, depending on like which way you look at the money, and they are not first in line, right? They're kind of like last in line, and first in line goes back to God. There's that ARK investment that was submitted like God 6, 7, 8 years ago. They submitted for a Bitcoin ETF. They've been stalled out because I mean we all learned every application was stalled out until they said, "Oh, you just need to get a surveillance partner."
you got to list
And then they're
Coinbase
like,
on there,
"Oh,
guys.
let me have that back." And I like basically took a piece like a lipstick or a crayon and just wrote a little line through it and said Coinbase.
Armstrong.
And then handed it back, and then it's like, okay, BlackRock, you're in. And meanwhile, everybody else who was there 6, 7 years ago is like, but we were, but you're not BlackRock.
Well, and I don't know if we just covered this or not, but late last night, Friday night, the SEC updating their website. It's super strange that it looks like it was dated on the 13th, but the news didn't break until Friday. I didn't see it yesterday when I looked, but that they have now accepted BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF application. We kind of heard this news. We covered it here a couple weeks ago about you had to list a surveillance partner. BlackRock's out there doing it, hitting the airwaves, calling it digital gold. And I'm guessing listed Coinbase as their surveillance partner. And now their application seems to be the first one to have been accepted. Now what? Now what happens in terms of what does this mean for markets? Does this give enterprise businesses some clarity that they need? I'll throw in two wrinkles here and we can move the conversation forward. But another one that broke through this week was the unlocking of the deals with the approval of Microsoft's acquisition of Activision, of Blizzard Activision. The FTC had put this one on ice and was reviewing the terms of the acquisition, and all of a sudden this is now unlocked. That's a major player in computer chips, AI, likely has a vested interest in the use of crypto or blockchain to facilitate those AI transactions in said games, in the metaverse. So, and then the other one, Bob Iger renewing his contract, Disney, Apple, we've talked long about them. All of a sudden he's getting re-upped. So two big things in the business world, when you stack that on top of at least a tinge of regulatory clarity, seems to me like the setup here for businesses, enterprise, and brands to get their stuff together. This is happening and it's not slowing down.
No, and one of the real losers here, maybe, and I hate to say it like that because I'm sure his offer was great, but there was that dude Danny Allegra, who was the Call of Duty Activision just like legend. You remember as soon as the FTC was questioning the transaction, he bounced. He forewent whatever acquisition money he would have made. I'm sure he would have been paid out tens of millions of dollars in bonuses for staying and waiting and believing, but he left. He went to Yuga Labs, where he's doing Bored Ape related gamification of that NFT new world and the other side and blah, blah, blah. But now it turns out that maybe Activision and maybe Microsoft were kind of angling all along during this stymie period, to use a weird term, because what resulted was like multilateral deal making. And somehow the real winner was Nintendo in my mind through all of this, because while they just sat on the sidelines quiet, suddenly Activision and Microsoft have to cut deals with Sony and Nintendo to block any antitrust accusations, allowing Call of Duty and all their games to spread across all their platforms, right? You can't just acquire Activision and then make it a Microsoft Xbox only game company, which is what they've done in the past. They acquired Bungie Studios, they launched Halo. That's the only reason the Xbox survived. So they have a history of doing just that, which is why they had to prove they weren't, which is why all these guys got these great deals made. So yeah, I look at that as a huge, huge indicator. Like, I'm not going to start screaming, waving the big red cape and say that the Bulls of Pamplona are about to run. But it's certainly a red flag and a red light saying, okay, it's summertime. It's deep July. And you got these mofos working on the weekends, it's supposedly. And like, Fink and these guys don't just snap their fingers and travel to go on CNBC. Like, this has all been laid out, planned, and they know it's all coming. And if you're going to be operating a business marketplace with transactions with retail customers, aka gamers, that will be on the Microsoft Xbox system and others, and it's going to be using some kind of a digital currency, which is going to go beyond the current loyalty program currencies, fiat, whatever, it's going to need to be defined. And so the timing of this, and then, like you said, Iger popping out as the, one more thing during the Apple event of like, oh, one more thing, here's all of Disney. So then you're thinking, well, wait a second, we talked about, but was Apple going to buy Disney? Are they going to go deeper together? Like, what's the FTC going to say about that? But as long as maybe certain Disney products can live on other networks, following the model of Activision, hey, there's now a path. And Iger's like, well, wow, give me 3 more years then. We got some precedent to exploit.
Yeah, we've got work to do, right?
It's the road is laid in brick, and the question will be will it eventually be paved in gold?
Or digital gold. I think, yeah, I mean, that's a really, really good take. In that ruling, Microsoft's acquisition of Activision has been described as the largest in tech history. So just these themes, I mean, we're talking about the largest acquisition in tech history. We're talking about the largest asset manager in the world. These are not small decisions. These are multi-billion-dollar decisions. And just to put a fine tip on it, I think it's worth mentioning the splitting of hairs. Even in this case, the judge ruling said that Microsoft has committed in writing, in public, in court, to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation for 10 years on parity with Xbox. So this sort of, we're going to give you the ability to make this acquisition, but we're going to set we're going to split some hairs here about what this win means for you guys, to make sure that the playing field is at least somewhat level as folks move into this. Because you can imagine, if I can play Call of Duty and I can start winning actual things and trade it in for actual XRP and trade it in at my bank for an actual dollar payment, eventually I'm going to want to play that game. And if Microsoft wanted, they could squeeze out Xbox, right? And now all of a sudden, or squeeze out PlayStation, excuse me. Yeah. And now they've got a monopoly over this ecosystem. So they've got a 10-year runway, and that's a really fine tip, I think, to explain what's happening in the market right now as these regulators and as these judges are trying to piece this apart.
Yeah, and that to me is like the micro, that's getting under there and getting to that little detail. You want to step back and look at it. For me, who I've been in the gaming industry for a decade and change, is this to me is a major indicator that hardware has won this cycle. Like, it's the software manufacturers are actually the candy that's going to lure you in to the metaverse. But the hardware is the metaverse, the door to get in. It's the bouncer. It's the how you validate yourself. It's how you realize it, is how you visualize it. And we're seeing that, okay, the hardware platform in this new wave of consolidation as it pertains to gaming and entertainment has Microsoft at one big pillar and Apple at another. And Microsoft has the Xbox, and Microsoft has, Google Pixel phones, and Microsoft, or whatever their partnership is, that they get their content onto phones. They have a mechanism, if you will, to kind of create hardware and experiences that can create a metaverse. We know Apple got their gaming arcade. They're not really a console per se, people call it casual games, but they really are a console now. They're a hardware console where you can play Call of Duty
anywhere you want,
Fortnite on your phone, and there they access with your face and your wallet to this new era. So if you would ask me 5-10 years ago about consolidation, I might have said that the biggest game companies might have been the ones controlling this new metaverse, experience. I don't know if I would have thought that the keys really rested in the laps of the hardware guys. So Microsoft and Apple position, along with Sony and Nintendo, for the next 10 years to try to figure out who is the king of gaming platforms, aka the burgeoning metaverse.
Yeah, so a couple more takes on this just to round out this new marketplace that's being stood up, these decisions that are happening, this unlock of an acquisition of one of the biggest acquisitions in tech history, these big unlocks, these big dominoes falling. One other one to point out here is you've got Gillibrand set to introduce a revised comprehensive crypto bill. So this news breaking on Wednesday. If you take the timeline, it's okay. Gillibrand's going to go out there and say, okay, we've got a new crypto bill. We still need another week. Get BlackRock out there saying it's digital gold, international currency. We got new Ripple. XRP is not a security going. Okay, Gensler's going to the press club on Monday. And in this new legislation, it says that in information provided by Lummis's office, the revised bill maintains much of the broad scope of the crypto legislation that they introduced last Congress, but is updated to reflect major developments in the industry, like the collapse of FTX. And it would clearly define a path for digital asset to transition from being treated as a security to a commodity. I'm reading straight from the block. So all of these projections, along with creating a comprehensive regulatory framework for the trading of digital assets in the U.S. and the issuance of stablecoins. I mean, so they're, this expanding of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission over these markets, this creation of some regulatory framework around digital assets exchanges. You got XRP is not a security, so we know it's going to go, I'm guessing, over to the commodity side of things to be regulated, or unless you have a surveillance partner that's a publicly traded company, and then we'll treat them as a security. It's all here. It's all here.
It's confusing too, and the timeline, like you said, right? You got Lummis on Wednesday. Then you have on Friday, or not even, because like you said, they backdated it on the SEC website. And the language they use there is it's a notice of a filing of a proposed rule change to list and trade shares of the iShares Bitcoin Trust under the NASDAQ rule 5711D, quote, commodity-based trust shares. So now they're even letting you know, like, it's not even the word security.
They're telling you what they're doing.
They're saying we're doing, and Lummis comes in with her. So now we have Congress is saying we have congressional oversight legislation. The appointed head of the SEC is going to come on Monday in front of our very own Mr. Toner. And yes, we got to do a part two. If Tommy Cruise can do a part two, then damn right that Michael Toner can. And we're going to have this part two because I want someone to stand up and just be like, okay, have you ever been involved in renaming a security to a commodity? Because the CFTC wants to know. What about the SEC going around and getting all this money from all these people for fines?
And
now
what about these
money back?
What about these cases now? He just sued Coinbase 2 weeks ago. Now what, dude? Now what?
But hey, that's proper negotiating. If you're in the business of being able to sue people willy-nilly, then obviously before you come and meet to talk about what's really going to happen, you have a whole bunch of active lawsuits. So if you need to pull something quote unquote off the table, you have something to pull.
You gave him a bargaining chip, didn't it?
And Kim Kardashian is like, wait a second. Do I get that $1.3 million back because I didn't promote anything that was a security?
No, you don't, Kim, but you can buy XRP.
It's on your Coinbase app. So I feel like, this Monday is our moment. It's the moment of Off the Record on the Rocks with Gary asking the hard questions, really pushing his buttons.
When I say it's all here, and you and I have talked about this for a long time too, and I'm glad we're digging in on these nuances. This nuance of the is XRP a security and is it really a win? Well, it kind of depends who and where you buy it and how you buy it and why you bought it, maybe, which is going to be really interesting to see how they piece this apart.
Why would they tell you it's a good thing to buy? Is Garlinghouse going to come out and still start talking about redoing the SWIFT system like 5 years later when everyone's like, what's the SWIFT system? Like you're so late to the party now.
Wasn't FedNow supposed to launch today?
FedNow supposed to launch July, so I don't know the date. Was it 15th?
I just am looking at it. I'm like, that starts to make a lot of fucking sense if now the FedNow system is now in motion and banks are now clearing.
On the website, FedNow launching in late July. See list of organizations certified as ready for the FedNow service.
And give me a
right
name
now. The announcement. Read the announcement to see the list.
Let's see the list, but it's coming.
The list is
help financial institutions deliver end-to-end faster payments to their customers.
Tons of them. JP Morgan Chase, Global Innovations Bank, U.S. Bank, U.S. Century Bank, United Bankers Bank, the Bankers Bank, Salem 5 Bank, Quad City Bank, Prima Federal Bank, People's Bank, PCBB, Avidia.
Wells Fargo. Yeah.
It's everybody, dude. It's literally a laundry list. It's the rogues gallery of all the cronies of the Federal Reserve. And
Wonder
they're
how
ready.
they got ready so quickly.
Well, they were supposed to be ready on July 15, like you said, but then they had to schedule those other things,
Yeah.
get Gary out in front on 17th, and then, okay, end of July, we'll push this thing out.
Yeah, because in order for FedNow to run on some sort of blockchain technology, they needed to pave the road, the digital road, for these commodities to run on, for these securities to run on, for the new banking system to run on, for BlackRock's ETFs to run on. I mean, we just swept it here. And anyone paying attention to all of this stuff, when we get into the nuance of this and then piece it apart, we are literally making sense of, don't be fooled. They are telling you exactly what they are doing. They are projecting and saying what they are going to do. They've been telling us the whole time. You just got to read the fine print. You got to click in, read the SEC filings, look for the late night Friday night massacres. They love to bury news on that SEC website. And now, FedNow, it's coming. It's going to run on some form of centralized blockchain technology. Is it XRP? Now is the question. Now that's the biggest question I have is, did the US government buy it as a security or did they buy it as a commodity?
I mean, the truth is too, we always talk about this to our listeners, like we're trying to parse this noise, finding the signal. And it's not easy following a lot of these articles. Because we want to get into like the global FUD. Let's not forget the last 2 to 3 weeks have been an ongoing parade of wild international sort of catastrophe and political intrigue that go on for days. From subs trying to go visit the Titanic to revelations of what the spy balloon was actually doing, to Putin undergoing
Chinese hackers
war,
getting into
Chinese hackers getting into things like this. Incredible news that really does steer the eyes and the hearts and the minds and pulls on the Patriots, strings. And then they just start, like you said, burying one SEC filing after another on their website, never even really talking about it, backdating it, and then launching hardcore news on Fridays and Saturdays. I mean, like hardcore. Like Saturday was the day that Gary approved the BlackRock ETF, and that's what launched 2 hours ago. This is 2 hours ago. I mean, it's mind-blowing the amount of distraction and delay that these guys are masters of.
Well, maybe
masters.
A couple things just to throw into that messiness and keep moving us forward here too. But aside from all of that stuff pulling on the global strings, you've had some of this in the crypto world, the former Celsius CEO being arrested and Celsius agreeing to pay $4.7 billion settlement. So as they're getting all of this regulatory clarity and as they're anointing Coinbase as the surveillance partner and as BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF is being approved, simultaneously out the back door, they're arresting other, CEOs. In this case, I'm guessing it's more fraud and money laundering, and there probably was some securities manipulation and things like that, but they're cleaning house, so it's not just the Kim Kardashian, supporting these tokens, but you've got the FTC announcing this $4.7 billion settlement against the exchange. It says will not be paid until creditors and investors have been repaid in the bankruptcy proceedings. So, whatever Celsius had left, which I don't think was much, but
well, and also, let's talk about the fact that I think his name is Alec Mashinsky, who's the CEO of Celsius, who's going to jail and responsible for just a boatload of money. That guy. What about old Sam Bankman-Fried, who was responsible for 10x that amount of money, and he just
I heard they found some. I heard they found some
more
money.
They went to Caroline Ellison, just turned her sofa upside down, and a bunch of Ethereum poured out. But then you also got to think too, and this is maybe going a little bit over, and forgive me for saying it to our audience, but underlying it too, right? Sam Bankman-Fried, friend of Gary Gensler, MIT Media Labs, dating his goddaughter, Caroline Ellison, and then you have Alex Mashinsky, born in Russia, came to the U.S. in the 70s, and trying to take all this money. So is it easier for the American government to just go shake down a Russian national? Probably. I mean, does Sam Bankman-Fried ever go to jail? Maybe not. It has a funny little feel to it, considering the current global political, sort of spectrum, if you will. So I also following that is like, who are the people that the SEC is really getting after? Do Kwon from Terra Luna, trying to get him back to South Korea, and they're going to take him apart. They found him in Montenegro. Where they found Mashinsky running around hiding. Russian national, that guy's going to go away for a while. Like, they're just going to start to lock down. These are basically international fugitives, not an American who's running around the Bahamas wearing the same flip-flops and with his big poofy hair. Like, it's a different narrative, right? When you're taking an American down. Armstrong, he gets sued. Mashinsky, he goes to jail. It's interesting dichotomy they're working, I think.
Yeah, I was going to take us to another place too that I think on the last episode we covered just more things stealing the narrative and kind of rounding out this episode here. But don't forget about old Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. Yeah. Both of them, this battle still playing. I know we covered it at length with Threads, the launch of Threads and Twitter and the lawsuits and Elon Musk fighting back. Well, again, this week, from his side, talk about in the global realm of things, starting another new company, X.AI, officially launching to explore and understand the meaning of humanity. Talk about a global pulling on heartstrings of starting this new company, and simultaneously Threads continuing to thrive, although kind of getting, people are, I think, trying to throw FUD at it. I've seen more people talk about the Fediverse and this integration with Mastodon, not being able to delete your data. I think they just had to pull Threads out of the EU. I saw that late last night. People were accessing Threads through VPN, and Facebook actually blocking now VPN access into Threads because of some of the privacy concerns, and nobody, more scrutinizing of privacy regulations than the UK with things like GDPR and just how they approach privacy generally for their folks in their country. So you got Elon Musk, you got Zuckerberg, and then the political climate here in the US. Talk about one other Bitcoin nothing burger, but we talked about the candidates. Bitcoin will be on the ballot, and I still think that is still being set up, even as this regulatory framework is coming, especially as the framework is getting set up to allow businesses to operate in these new economic markets using crypto, using generative AI, using gaming and play to win mechanics. Candidates are going to need to understand that stuff. They're going to need to understand the privacy considerations, and they're going to want to raise money in the metaverse. They're going to want to take donations in Bitcoin
and crypto generally.
And we thought Kennedy was the guy out there saying, yeah, but turns out maybe that's not the case.
I don't know. Old Robert Kennedy, who I like to call Bitcoin Bobby, he's been out early talking about taking donations in Bitcoin. So of course the regulators have to decide how, where, and when they're going to be able to do that and define all that. But then it comes out that after some weird flip-flopping wishy-washiness that maybe he had $250,000 worth of Bitcoin at one point, but then he said he never actually got it himself. So he's sort of coming back off this thing. Like you said, I think that the real tell is going to be Bitcoin, crypto, AI, all these things are going to be on the ballot. And there are going to be candidates that either understand it or there are candidates that can read bullet points about it. And it's going to become real clear real fast who's steering into or away from that. And just to double back on what you said about Elon and his new XAI company and all this craziness, positioning himself right now as the good guy. He's always sort of enjoyed being a villain, right? He sort of enjoys this Bond villain sort of vibe. Sure. Whether or not he himself is an evil person or if he's just sort of so neutral because of his claims sort of being on the spectrum or whatever, whatever he claims, now he sort of is sliding in saying, oh, but we have this new company. And this new company is for the true meaning of humanity. And we need to be careful about AI. And I have all these people who are going to be working with me. And, oh, didn't you hear? The FTC is already scrutinizing and potentially suing OpenAI for the kind of, unfair information distribution and bias and deceptive practices. Maybe, OpenAI will end up needing to be shut down, regulated, governed a bit. And here I am in a position to tell you, I told you, and here's how our group is going to then move forward. So I feel like Elon's been bad guy, bad guy, bad guy, bad guy. And on AI, he thinks, actually, you know what? I know more than all these donkeys. I'm going to be the good guy on this one.
Well, maybe some final thoughts here, but looking back at recent history and the way markets have moved, I think about social media. We talked about this for the last 50 episodes, but Web 2, the regulatory environment around social media, the use of social media to meet the SEC's guidelines of full and fair disclosure. It was like there was this initial flood of companies. Then everyone had to back off and wait about 12 months for the regulators to catch up. Then you had this metaverse come flying in 2020, 2021, and then kind of had to back off a little bit. Even these big companies, even Starbucks NFT projects, Amazon's NFT project, and I don't know where that went. They all had to back off, wait for regulatory framework. And then as that's coming, AI, AI is here, guys. AI is the next big thing. All the new crypto experts are now AI experts. They're all out there talking about generative AI. And here's Musk saying, whoa. Let's back up a little bit. The cadence of that seems to make logical sense to me, that everyone's riding this hype cycle in AI, but the moment the regulators and Gillibrand and Gensler get through this next wave and FedNow launches and Bitcoin's on the ballot, what's the next thing all these guys are going to move on the docket, which is regulation around AI? And you're already seeing this come out of the UK. You're seeing, even in China putting out some AI regulation just in the past couple of days. So Musk may be on to something here. I could see a cooling of the AI to let the regulators catch up, let the rule makers catch up, let the technology, the brands catch up, and he may be right in terms of that cadence. So final thoughts as we head into Monday's Gensler meeting at the press club, and what do I need to ask this guy?
I mean, I would start asking about, well, let's just pause on that for one sec. But I would say, one of the tricks that the masters do is that they scoop the narrative by changing the terms with which things are defined by. So Apple, look, we went through the entire Apple event and subsequent events announcement. Did they ever say the word AI once? No. They say transformer language modal machine
neural
learning.
engine.
Neural engine. They say those words. Does BlackRock ever say Bitcoin ETF? No. It says like commodity iShare something. So marketers are marketers. And if I think the thing to look for as we roll into this next week is what are the new terms that Gary and the SEC, what are they going to introduce during that event? If we had the opportunity to ask some questions, the kind of questions are, Mr. Gensler, are iShares commodity-based trades equivalent to a Bitcoin ETF? And if so, why are they two different terms? Like, let's get them to be pinned down, because no one ever asks them when they start switching up their language, why?
Yeah.
No one ever
Does
asks
this
Apple
mean
where
that
the AI is. They just don't get to. So I feel like it's going to be one of those, hey, bring out your little graph paper journal and just start asking for definitions of terms like it's a vocabulary test. That would be amazing.
I like the idea. I think this digital commodities framework that I'm reading in that SEC filing and the Gillibrand language there, talking about how they're going to bring this whatever digital commodities framework or digital assets framework. I think that term digital assets will continue to make headway and getting some definition there. What's the difference between a digital asset and a security? I will leave it there, sir. It's been a pleasure. We'll talk again Monday late and see what
Part
old
2, baby.
Gensler's got to say coming out of the SEC. We'll do it again.
Have a great rest of your weekend.
That's all the time we have for Off the Record, On the Rocks. Join us next week for news and all things crypto. Bring up the house lights. It's last call.
$38.40